Hey everyone, it's the second episode of the Super Smash Crew podcast. I'm AJ, and after the whole fiasco that was the first episode, there were a lot of problems. The first thing that I have to bring up is the setting. My voice echoed a lot throughout the first episode, so I decided to move into my closet, since that's literally the only small room in my entire house. I'm not even kidding. But enough about that. Let's just dive right into it with the second episode of the But enough about that. Let's just dive in right into the second episode of the podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the first three installments of Super Smash Crew's spiritual successor, Super Smash Lesbians. I already discussed the whole lore of Shared Verse, so I don't need to go over that again, thankfully. So, but I do, but I do have to bring up one other thing. One thing that I forgot to bring up was how one thing that I did stumble upon with the first episode was I didn't really explain storylines, which I'm just starting to realize that I could probably use that word to describe other events throughout Shared Verse, thankfully. So, one other storyline that was going on during Super Smash Crew was Disney Finding Evolution. I can't talk about it right now because there's a lot in Disney Finding Evolution, but the point being, it's basically a civil war between the original Disney from like the beginning to mid to late 2000s that want to preserve history. They want to preserve the history of their past, even though it is kind of shitty and god awful. Going up against, and they're pretty much defending what they have against the new faction of Disney, that being Neo Disney, that want to erase the history and replace it with a more progressive and modernistic approach. Yeah, kind of like right now. Yeah, it says a lot about their remakes, you know? One incident that was going on was. One of the incidents that was going on during the. One of the incidents that was going on during the whole fight. One of the incidents that was going on was Original Disney, or Ridge Disney for short. That group was defending the ABC Family Building that was been. The ABC Family Building that was one of the one of the more recent events that was going on during the early 2016 was Original Disney, or Ridge Disney for short, were defending the ABC Family Building that they've been holding on for since 2001, and a building that's been standing for at least half a century. Neo Disney was going to replace that building with their new Freeform building. Obviously, it's a callback to how ABC Family changed to Freeform in early 2016. But in conclusion, Original Disney was able to defend and keep. But in it, but in the end, Neo Disney was able to still build their Freeform building, but Original Disney was able to keep their ABC Family building through. But ABC Family was able, but Original Disney was able to keep the ABC Family building because somebody had the deed to the place back from 2001, and they had a little celebration of it, and the ABC Family became. And the ABC Family building became a museum for everything from like the 60s when it was originally Family Channel, and then Fox Family, and then ABC Family. So why am I telling you this, and what does it have to do with Smash? So why am I telling you this, and why does it... So why am I telling you this, and why does it relate to Super Smash Bros.? Well, I'll tell you. The following day, I was home. Actually, no, I was at school. Although, actually, I was on the train going to school, but the point being, I get a call from one of the people that were defending the ABC Family building, and they had like a really big party, drinks and everything. Of course, I couldn't go because I was, in school. And the person said to me, "You know what, AJ? There's a lot of lesbians out there. I don't know. I'm on a hangover. My wife's yelling at me to feed my 4 kids. Can you, just wanted to let you know there's a lot of lesbians out there. And I just tell the person, Zero, you're drunk. You really need some sleep. And I didn't think of much until... And I didn't think of much of it while I was at school. But then, after I got home from school, I, intentionally or not, talked to at least 5 or 6 lesbian couples within that one day. And I was dumbfounded. I was pretty much baffled that this one conversation I had somehow, ironically, ended up into me witnessing the truth. There are a lot of lesbians out there. And so, January 13th of 2016 was known as the Day of the Lesbians, because there were so many that I talked to that day. 2 days later, the first event of Super Smash Lesbians was aired on YouTube through a live stream. Yeah, it didn't take that long now, did it? Well, anyway, Recall that the two major problems for Super Smash Crew's failure was, 1, the demographic was all over the place, and 2, the show went on for too long that other new things were starting to pop up, and it lost its popularity. Smash Lesbians didn't do that. First of all, it was only a one-night-only event, and it was live streamed on YouTube, and people could watch it whenever they want. And second, it didn't matter what you were from, what show you're from, what your demographic is, as long as you're a lesbian, you could get in. If you were born a guy and then have the ability to turn into a girl, that doesn't count, I'm sorry. Am I sexist for trans? No, but you'll see why. Does that mean and yeah, I know, it's weird. A straight guy directing a whole bunch of homosexual women. It's weird. And yeah, I know. A heterosexual guy directing a whole bunch of homosexual women to dress up as Nintendo characters is weird. But that's what we live with. I don't know what to tell you. Also, speaking of which, another thing that was a massive difference between Super Smash Bros. And Super Smash Lesbians was that we only had like 18 people for SSL compared to at least, I don't know, around like 40 people for Super Smash Crew. So, yeah, there was a lot of difference, and I did learn from my mistakes in a way. Unfortunately, those 2 rules kind of got screwed over within the first episode, but in later installments they were enforced. Once again, I'm not going to tell you all the characters, but once again, I'm not going to tell you all the characters. I could probably do a whole character episode, just literally telling you which character is playing what role. But that's hopefully for another time. I don't know. I have so many characters. That's probably going to be an hour long, just explaining to you, okay, this character is this because of X and Y. The point being, our Master Hand equivalent for Super Smash Lesbians was Samus in a giant mech robot we called Master Chef, because apparently she started to learn how to get good at cooking. And technically speaking, it was the idea for Smash Lesbians was basically have all these lesbian couples, put them in a blender, and then boom. So yeah, we used I used the whole chef idea a lot. But of course, since this was early 2016, Rosalina had to show up. And so her and her 3 other friends from Smash 4, and they called themselves the group Smash 4. I don't know what the hell her idea was for calling them that name, but anyway. It wasn't long until they found out that the event was going on, and so they pretty much invaded the set, found out that Samus was playing Master Chef, because the identity of Master Chef was kept a secret as a nice little callback to Metroid 1 and 2, where if you beat the game under a certain time period, you would find out that Samus was a woman. So basically, Rosalina just absolutely kicked the shit out of Samus, and it also didn't help that 2 weeks before I started the live stream, I got married to Rosalina. Oh, so if it's weird that a high schooler got married to a space goddess, don't worry, it's on my astral half side. Not, it doesn't affect my real. It only affects my astral spirit half. My It only affects my astral side of things, not my real side of things. So that's the whole marriage situation. In fact, I actually married Rosalina out of pure spite. What kind of a great husband I am. So, yeah, Super Smash Lesbians ended on a whimper. So, yeah, I kind of got pissed off that Rosalina shut up without anyone's permission and pretty much claimed to be the champion of the first event. So, while Super Smash Lesbians ended off on a whimper, everything else before that was actually pretty good. A lot of people liked the event, and they were actually waiting for a sequel. A Super Smash Lesbians Melee, if you will, which 2 months later, we did another event. We added in, I think, 3 or 4 more couples, and finally, within those 4 couples, we finally had all 12 original fighters from the first Super Smash game, the first Super Smash Bros. Game for the and finally at that point we had all 12 original fighters being portrayed. And finally we had all 12 fighters from the original Smash 4. And finally we had all 12 characters from the original Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 being portrayed in Super Smash Lesbians. Because I didn't have a Captain Falcon for the original Smash Lesbians, but now I did. So, everyone's happy. Although, because I'm always learning things, I realized that I shouldn't really have Rosalina be in this event, because she's only going to make things worse. So I did the gentleman's thing, and I took her out to dinner for our 2-month anniversary. And with Rosalina out of the picture, her other 3 friends, that being Palutena, Wii Fit Trainer, and Lucina, they really couldn't do anything on their own. They really needed Rosalina to do some scheming. And yeah, it is kind of dumb that I wasn't there to direct everyone for the event, but they already knew what they were doing. We had like 2 or 3 people that were already from Super Smash Group in Smash Lesbians, so they kind of knew what they were doing, and they were kind of like holding the fort for me in a way. And you know what? Super Smash Lesbians Melee actually did pretty good. There was no problems. Nobody interfered and ruined the set. It ended off pretty nicely, actually. In fact, it ended so nicely that a couple of months later, I added in 3 DLC fighters for Smash Lesbians Melee's game adaptation. So, everything was going out well. And that was that for Super Smash Lesbians in 2016. There were other storylines I wanted to do and had to be forced into doing, so yeah, I really didn't have a say in if I wanted to continue Smash Lesbians, but the point was, it ended off on a high note, and that's where I wanted to end. Until 2017, where the 1-year anniversary for the first event was coming up right away. So, I did a 3rd installment. Called it Super Smash Lesbians, the 1-year anniversary. I know, it's a dumb name, but basically everyone came back, reminiscing about all the times from 2016, and it was doing good so far. In fact, I had 2 more people show up, and they really weren't a couple, but they were just there because they phoned. But we had 2 new characters to show up, that being a high school teacher named Margaret and a high school student named Nozomi. They're not in love with each other, but they faked their registration into being in the show, saying that they weren't in love, even though they weren't. And Nozomi was a nice person. She was a very nice person, good friend and everything. Margaret, Margaret, not so much. Really, I mean, she wasn't a bitch or anything. She was a very extremely nice person. But we made her Bowser for a reason. Because Margaret has the ability to turn herself into a younger, more muscular, more fit, red-haired, guns glory and everything, version of herself named Melissa, and she basically was the Giga Bowser for Super Smash Lesbians. It turns out that Margaret was from an organization called the Sub-Zero, organization. It turns out Margaret was from. It turns out Margaret was from a group from. It turns out Margaret's from a group from. It turns out Margaret is from a group called the Sub-Zero Organization from another storyline in late 2016, and I just kind of knew that things were not going to go well enough. Although thankfully by that point, Rosalina and Samus made up after Rosalina saving her ass from both depression and suicide, so yeah, it gets really dark, and I really hope I don't have to talk about how Samus pretty much lost everything, including her child. And if you're and if you're and if you're wondering why Rosalina didn't do any schemes for this installment of Super Smash Lesbians, it's actually because her and Rosalina. By 2017, Rosalina and Samus made up their differences, and they became somewhat of lighthearted rivals. They still hated each other, but they weren't out to kill each other for blood every fucking week. So that's really the reason why Rosalina wasn't up to doing any good. However, thankfully, Margaret was able to snap herself back into her. However, Margaret was able to snap herself back into her own conscience and pretty much killed herself in order to stop Melissa from Roman. And Margaret actually killed herself so she could prevent Melissa from. However, it wasn't long until Margaret snapped herself back into conscience, and she fucking killed herself in order for her to prevent Melissa from doing any more danger. She also told Nozomi a whole truth bomb about her actual origins. It turns out Nozomi was actually a artificially cloned killing machine based off of ants because she has a big ass and she has hair that kind of resembles ant antennas. Okay? And she was actually supposed to be used for one of the bad guys from a previous storyline named Units. And Units, long story short, is basically our equivalent of the MCU, where you have multiple storylines interacting with one another and then having a big crossover at the end. So Nozomi was supposed to be like the final weapon of the main bad guys, but she wasn't activated at that point, so she went to the main base, realized that everything that she knew and loved was a complete farce. And if you're wondering what series Nozomi is from, she's from a show called Kijo. And I highly recommend you not to watch Kijo in public. It's not hentai or anything, but it's very sexual. I'm just gonna leave it there. So after knowing all this and realizing that she could potentially cause more harm, Nozomi decides to burn the entire laboratory where she was created, including herself. And I had to be there to see it all happen. So you could tell that I went to bed pretty fucking happy that night. Early stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning. Rosalina was sleeping just fine like a baby, and I just couldn't stop thinking about Nozomi pretty much burning herself alive in that building. And I had no say in it, because of course I'm a man. So, in conclusion, those are the three storylines. So, in conclusion, those are the first three installments for Super Smash Lesbians. But, now this is opening up new things. Who are the Sub-Zero Organization? What is the Sub-Zero Organization? Is it going to affect Super Smash Lesbians in the future? Well, you'll have to see later in the next episode. With that, I'm AJ. Please follow me on Twitter, AJ Smashing. Please follow me on Twitter, AJ Smashing. This is where I'm going to be telling everyone that I'm uploading all my stuff, because I really cannot do any alternate accounts. I just can't. I just like to have everything be on one account, and that's it. So please follow me there. Instagram, not really. I don't really use it that much. You know, if you want to put me in on Discord. Leave a comment on my Twitter. That's what I'm just gonna tell you that right now. And with that said, that's it. And I hope y'all have a good day.